Thank you for attending the Westerville City Schools Board of Education meeting. Though providing an opportunity for public comment during our school board meetings is not a requirement, the Westerville City School District, WCSD Board of Education, believes it is an important part of its engagement with and accountability to the community. In response to the public gathering restrictions, which are now in place due to the coronavirus, and in the spirit of maintaining an opportunity for our public to participate in these virtual school board meetings, we are offering interested persons an opportunity to submit written public comment. During a typical WCSD Board of Education meeting, there are two opportunities for individuals to address the board. While functioning under this virtual meeting environment, the opportunity to submit public comment will open shortly after the meeting begins at approximately 6 p.m. and close shortly after each public comment section is reached on the agenda. When submitting your comments through the provided forms, we ask you to keep your comments professional, avoid the use of inappropriate language, and refrain from identifying individuals by name in the event of a complaint. You may use the following links to submit written public comments for the board's consideration: a link for a specific agenda item and a link for a general comment. All comments submitted become a matter of public record and are subject to release under Ohio law and the Federal Freedom of Information Act. As with in-person public comments made during a traditional school board meeting, members reserve the right to respond immediately or withhold comment in order to conduct appropriate research and follow up with the speaker at a later time. Thank you in advance for your understanding and cooperation. And again, thank you for attending this Westerville City Schools Board of Education meeting. With that, Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Here.
Mrs. Davidson. Dr. Nesterbaker.
Here.
Mr. Bell.
Here.
Mr. Velardo.
Here. And with that, would you please stand if you are able and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 4.01, a motion and a second to temporarily suspend board policy PO 0169.1, public participation at Board of Education meetings. May I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you both very much. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Marshall, please call the roll.
Mr. Bell.
Yes.
Dr. Nesterbaker.
Yes.
Mrs. Altman.
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes.
Mr. Velardo.
Yes, thank you very much. Agenda item 5.01, a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the virtual hybrid Board of Education meeting held on Monday, September 14, 2020, as presented. May I have a motion and a second? Thank you.
Second.
Thank you very much. Any discussion, questions, corrections? Hearing none. Mr. Marshall, please call the roll.
Yes.
Mr. Bell.
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes.
Dr. Nesterbaker.
Yes.
Mr. Velardo.
Yes, thank you very much. Agenda item 6, reports 6.01, superintendent update. Dr. Kellogg, please share with us.
Thank you, President Velardo, members of the board, and to those tuning in this evening. It's my pleasure to bring you an update in regard to how the school year is going and the different activities we have going on. So I'd like to hit on a couple of topics this evening. I'm going to talk a little bit about our transition to blended learning and what we've seen after one full week plus a day. Talk a little bit about some of the early pressure points we're seeing that we just want to keep an eye on moving forward. I want to talk a little bit more about where we are with the virtual academy and some of the concerns there. And I want to provide the board and the community a little update where we are in terms of working on our equity work as a district. So with that, transition to blended. Of course, last week we opened up to cohort A. It went very well. I got to buildings, about 12 buildings over 3 days, and got to visit. What I saw were a lot of happy staff, a lot of happy students as they came together for the first time in months, dating back to March. The other thing I observed beyond just the joy with which people came back was how careful people were adhering to our health standards and expectations, wearing masks, social distancing, etc. I visited some lunches, which is always interesting, recess, kids arriving at school, some dismissal, and things seemed to run pretty well across the board. So I think schools made some tweaks in their first week, and then of course we welcomed cohort B today, and hopefully that one as well as expected as we move forward. Just another piece for the community. I know the board's aware. We have on our website now a data dashboard for COVID. It has information about active cases and quarantine cases within the district if people are interested in seeing that information. Right now, those numbers are running very, very low. We're pleased with that. So you can track that at the building level, at the district level, both in terms of active cases and cases of quarantine related to COVID by each building in the district overall. Soon, the public will start seeing an additional part to our data dashboard. We're partnering with Ohio State University's College of Public Health, I believe it is, and putting up a outward-facing data dashboard that will have more granular data, not just Franklin County data, but school attendance zone data as well. So we are getting more and more tools to keep an eye on things for our schools and keep people safe as we move forward in this new environment. So just some things there for the community to look for on our website in terms of a data dashboard. Some pressure points we're seeing. Let's talk about transportation for a moment. I know there's been some concern regarding alternative stops that we've done traditionally. This is a service that as a school district we've been able to accommodate for years, where people ask for bus stops different than their home address. In some cases, it's both to drop off and pick up spots all the time. Some cases it's changes in which day they want to be dropped off and picked up. Some days it's different in the morning, different in the afternoons, and of course we have our child care centers. And so that's been something that in the past we have worked hard in the summer to accommodate those requests, and at this time we're simply not able to honor those requests, although we're looking for that in the future. It's just trying to get our feet underneath us in the current situation, planning for this blended environment, special education, career technical schools, transportation to community and charter schools, transportation to our non-public schools, specialized transportation for our special education students that require specialized transportation, are all pieces of the puzzle we had to put in place and wanted to make sure we were operating safely before we expanded our services. The other piece we had to keep an eye on as we were planning the summer for fall transportation was similar to what we did in the spring with the need for perhaps leaning on transportation for food service. So when we built our transportation plan, we did what we always do. We start with building bus stops around those students who are eligible for transportation and building bus stops per board policy that are within a half-mile of their half-mile walking distance from their home. In the future, as we get our feet underneath us and get a better handle on things, we will look to see if we can expand services to provide some more alternative pickup and drop-off spots, particularly as it relates to child care centers for elementary school students. I'd like to tell you I have a timeline in place now. I don't. We're really only in our second week of transporting students, so we really need to see how that goes. The other piece of that transportation, and you'll see this in some other places, is making sure we have enough drivers. We already have some of our transportation team who are normally dispatching and managing things from their offices who have been called into duty and had to drive buses because of a shortage of number of drivers. So that is almost a day-to-day concern for us about whether or not we're going to have enough drivers to make the routes we have. Unfortunately, you're going to see some of what we don't like doing, which is double back routes. That is where a bus has to take a route, drop off, come back to that same school and pick up again, which means we have students waiting for the bus to come pick them up and take them home, which means someone has to supervise those students, and it has to be done per our health standards that we have. So all those pieces are in place so we can operate safely now. As we get better at that, we'll see if we can expand those services further on down the road. So that's where our transportation. Custodial services is another pressure point. Trying to keep our buildings healthy and safe for our students and our staff is challenging enough. We have really limited bringing in non-district activities on our properties because they add the need for custodial services to cover those events, to make sure those spaces are sanitized appropriately before and afterwards so that we can use them. And again, it's a place where our resources are spread pretty thin. The workload's going up, and we have concerns about being able to maintain those services with the staff that we have. So it's one of those areas where if we don't have enough substitute custodians, we are in a situation where keeping buildings safe and clean for our own purposes is difficult. So we'll continue monitoring that one as well. So transportation, custodial services, 2 areas we'll be monitoring along the way. In fact, the OSU data dashboard I was discussing earlier has a function in which we'll be able to look at those employee groups and their attendance and see if we're running into problems. The other pressure point has continued to be around requests for changes, either into the virtual academy or out of the virtual academy. I shared with the board in the update last week numbers of changes since September 1 when we opened the virtual academy. The ripple effects of those changes are pretty tremendous because when you take a student out of the WVA and put them back into a building, if they need transportation services, we have to look at that as part of transportation. If that's an additional stop, that means adding that stop, which then affects every stop afterwards in terms of timing that has to be communicated. We've built class sizes in our blended model to reflect what we can do in with social distancing. So any additional changes to those impacts those class sizes and affects our ability to maintain the right class sizes and class rosters. So in the elementary school. So we have processed a large number of those. I think the last number I saw since September 1, we've moved over 150 students out of the WVA back into the blended environment, and we've moved a little over 100 students out of the blended environment back into the WVA during that time period. So we continue to monitor that. We continue to work hard to be as flexible as we can, but there are limitations to what we're able to do on those resources. So wanted to give you an update on some of those pressure points that we're feeling and how we're dealing with them. And we'll continue to try and work on those areas to make sure we can meet the demands. Before I transition to WVA, any questions within there that you want to ask? Or you want me to just keep moving on through?
I got a quick question for you. It's primarily a point of clarification. When we are talking about the alternative bus stops, some of the things that that I've heard in the community is a belief that we are required to do that. And I think even though I know some people feel that it's harsh, it's important to understand that it's something we have done as a service over many number of years, so people have become accustomed to that. But in actuality, what we've had to do is make sure that we adhere very tightly to our transportation requirements. So the services that people have come to expect from the district sometimes can't occur. Am I saying that correctly when I'm saying that to people?
Yeah, you're correct. Even by board policy, it says half mile from the child's home. And so we build out our routes based on the information we have in Power School. Traditionally, in the summer, we then receive requests for changes to those routes, and then we're able to see about accommodating those as we're building the routes. We didn't go into it this way this year. I'll give you another example. This is kind of a small slice of what transportation faces. Not all the schools we transport students to, non-publics, community school, career centers, are all operating on the same schedule. Not just the start time and end time, but whether or not they're blended every other day, every 2 days, or every week like we are. With our Career Center students, for example, they're on an alternating day schedule. Some Career Center students go half day. Some Career Center students go all day. So we're having to accommodate for the half day students who we have Career Center students who are in the virtual academy for half the day, then come to the high school and catch their bus up to the Career Center on the days they have their Career Center programs. And some of those Career Center programs are not running on an alternate schedule. They're running every day. So, you know, this is sewing together a patchwork of a lot of different needs to make sure we get everybody where they're supposed to be safely and on time. And then trying to provide some flexibility within that at some point. If we do it too quickly and we're not prepared, we're more likely to do the worst thing possible, which is not transport the right person to the right place at the right time. And that's what transportation was about. So they are already projecting ahead to looking at, as we settle in, can we modify things, particularly deal with our child care centers, where we know those are a little bit easier because it's the same spot every day all the time. The other hard ones are, they need to be at this house on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and this house Tuesday, Thursday. So that's where it gets tricky. Any other questions? Yes, Tracy.
So, did I hear you say that transportation building concessions for our special ed population?
We always do. So special education students whose IEP calls for specialized transportation.
Okay.
Yes. So, for example, the My Van program is where we traditionally do that, or sometimes we contract with another party vendor if we can't do it with ours.
Okay. And then as part of the new dashboard, do we have the transition criteria from remote to hybrid on there for the community to see?
It's not, I don't know if it's up on, I'll have to check to see if we put that up on the actual dashboard. I'm not sure if we have it or not, but we can. It has a model we're currently in the data set for active cases and quarantine cases. But I think what you're looking for is from the presentation last time with the actual, I'll check to see if it's not, we'll get that up.
Just for the community to be able to watch that.
Sure will.
Thank you.
Anything else up to here? Yes. Ms. Allman.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Just a quick one. I just wondered if you've had an opportunity to speak with many teachers. I know it's only been a weekend, and this is a very different year. Teachers are being asked to do lots of different things. But what are we hearing about the balance of their responsibilities? Have you had a chance to really engage with staff on how this juggling act, because we all know that's what it is, how that's feeling?
Correct. I have not yet. We have two-way communication channels. Our curriculum department, for example, with high school folks meet with department chairs from middle school and high school on a regular basis. So we'll start to have those conversations. We have some conversations coming up I'm going to talk about here in a minute with some of our WVA teachers. A lot of our WVA teachers are also teaching in the blended environment. So that's an area we really want to get a handle on to see how teachers are managing the preps around that, and how we're leaning on each other as teachers to share in that responsibility, right? So I think that's one of the learning curves we want to see now as we're getting into it. Mr. Bell?
Could you say a word regarding the transportation issue with alternate drop-off and pickup locations? The challenge with that becomes, I didn't know this till I talked to Scott about it, but once you make that change, there's a ripple effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if I move a stop at the beginning of the route, that affects every stop afterwards, then which affects all those families, which creates
communication
hardship.
Correct. I remember, although I'm old, a long time ago, waiting for the bus in the days when we didn't have GPS that told me when the bus was going to be there and down to the minute. And so I know that this issue of what time's the bus coming is a big one for families. So when we change those stops, there's a ripple effect of the timing, because you have to stop the bus, let the kid get on, sit down, and then downstream, everybody after that's affected. And the whole thing has to line up so that the bus gets to the school at the right time. So it's going to shift things on that time continuum for people and creates more communication of another change. And so we just want to be thoughtful of that and get into a groove with what we have, and then see what else we could expand to and accommodate. But we know that's a pressure cooker for families, and we want to find a way to get there.
Thank you.
Okay. So talk a little bit about the virtual academy. This is probably the area where we've had the greatest amount of concern, continue to get emails at the elementary level and somewhat at the secondary level, and you know, understand the pressures, changes. This is very different for people, for us and for the folks at home. And so I know it hasn't gone as smoothly as people would hope. We continue daily to look for ways to make improvements. I know that the curriculum team at the elementary level has already had a meeting with some parents to talk about their perceptions, has already made some changes, is already working with teachers on resources. The secondary level, I think a survey has gone out to parents already, trying to gain some feedback on their experience with Apex. And we'll sit down and talk with teachers as well to see how it's going for them, and collecting all those pieces to find ways to make the model better as we move on. In general, I think what people really want to see more from the WVA is structure and connectedness. They want to feel that they're part of the system. They want to feel that they have structure in what their students are being asked to do. They want to make sure they feel part of the overall district. And so we're taking that to heart. I've tasked our team to continue those conversations and continue working on the model. And they continue to make adjustments as we move along. Much like last spring when we got shut down and had to figure out some things as we went along. For example, grading last spring. And we had to make adjustments in what we're doing with our grading policies, adding pass-fail. We continue to do the same thing here, listening to what people's concerns are, seeing how we can adjust things so that we are not doing things to make it more difficult for students and unfair to students as we move along. So I talked to elementary today. They're already working on in the WVA creating recorded video lessons for our math program. So they've gotten grade level teachers who have agreed to create some video content to go inside the digital products that we're using. So we continue to grow the resources to meet those needs as we move along. Secondary was talking about grading policies today and what we need to do there to help make sure kids feel safe and secure in terms of what we're doing with grades. So a lot going on in that space. We'll continue to work on it and get it to a space where it's where we want it to be. Any question about WVA before I move on to equity?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I know there were a couple of courses, and we've talked about the language ones, like the Spanish 2, where they weren't quite aligned. I've heard some things about a health course, the 6th grade health course that maybe was not what we thought it was going to be. So how are those course shifts happening where students are already involved? I mean, they're already enrolled, already taking a course. What does that look like?
So the Spanish one, I know we discussed last time, and that correction's been made. Seems to be moving along well. The teachers, from what I'm hearing, are reporting back. We seem to be in that level playing field again. The health course you referenced, the team has gone back, and the secondary curriculum team is pulling some grade level teachers to look at that, and going to work with some parents to look forward at anything else in there and whether or not this course can be modified in a way that meets middle school student needs, or whether or not we need to do something else. So that one has been pulled for the moment and being re-examined so that we can make sure it's serving the needs of our students moving forward. So we'll continue. I mean, those are the kinds of things that we start to unpack when we move along, and that feedback from parents has been very helpful to us to find those sore spots, and from our teachers, and to start to address those. And when they come, we'll pull it together, regroup, fix it, and make sure that we get it where we want it to be. And I know they're already talking about additional middle school electives and what might we need to be able to build out, because the portfolio of electives we have through Apex right now for middle school in particular is pretty limited. So we're already talking about internal resources we could add to see what else we could plug in place.
Okay, thanks. And then just you mentioned there was a conversation about, I think it was grading policies, trying to take notes real fast. And I would just like to put out there with grading policies, if the attendance requirements can just be clarified. I have a high schooler myself in WVA, and so her and her friends, and it's sort of, I think people are still trying to figure out what counts as attending. And I know there have been messages about that, but there just still seems to be some confusion, at least among the students, about what is required for attendance in those courses. So just if we can continue to communicate on that point, that would be great.
I'll ask the team to see if we can't put something out specifically to students, and I'm actually working with Greg Vibrands tomorrow. We're going to use the thought exchange tool, and I'm going to do a thought exchange with both sets of students, one for the blended environment. Tell me about your experience today, kind of that kind of question. Same with WVA. Those students, just to hear what's on their minds as they're now into these and how that might help us. I think some student voice in this would be helpful, and that may be one of the ones that pops up, but we'll take a look at that and communicate out as well.
Okay, thanks for making space for their voices.
Yeah. Ms. Davidson?
So, do private music lessons count for a music credit for our WVA kids? So if they're taking piano or something outside, can that count for a music credit?
For high school, it's easy because you can do it through Credit Flex.
Right, but not middle school.
Let me take that one back and see what kind of magic we can produce. I think there's some thoughts how we might do that. Let me take that back to the team and see what we can spin around and see if we can't come up with something.
Okay, and then as far as grading policies for WVA, is there a way they can be the same across the board?
Tell me more what you mean, same across the
So
board.
it sounds as if different teachers are grading differently. So even expectation-wise, as far as how much an exam or a quiz, the percentage, how that goes into the grade. That's what I'm hearing. I don't have a WVA kid, but I'm hearing it's different. Can you confirm that or deny that?
I'd like to get more on that question because there's a lot to unpack in there, particularly around Apex. My first thought is, in a traditional classroom, all teachers have different weights to those grades, right? So I might count homework 10%, another teacher counts homework 20%. Some teachers count tests X percent, other teachers count it a different percent. Those are all different already, the weightings of those. So there's that piece. Then within Apex, it's a different environment because we're looking at two things. Are they completing the assignments, the units? So there's this, if there's a pacing chart that says you need to have these 10 assignments done in this time period, and you have 7 of the 10 done, that's one kind of a report. Then there's your progress grade. How are you doing on the assignments you've completed is a second. So I was with the academic affairs people today talking about some of these. I think it's a point of conversation with some of those parents and I think some of the students to make sure we're all, when we're saying grading, we're talking about the same things. Also within Apex, part of what people deal with is in order for a student to move on to the next unit, they have to demonstrate mastery. And we originally had the mastery mark set at 70. So if you studied the unit online, took the end of unit quiz and scored above 70, that meant you successfully could move on to the next unit. If you did not, then you had to go back, restudy, and retake the quiz. I know that they dropped that 70 to a 60 so students could move forward. So that's a different part of the system than when we talk about grades on a grade card. So there's a lot to unpack in that. The team's aware of that. We talked about that today, but we will certainly work with our teachers and students and parents to understand what they're looking at and make sure we provide clarity around how that's going to be accomplished.
Okay.
I think I got some of those issues. Does that make sense to the board?
Can I just follow up one question based on something you just said, which is the unlocking of quizzes and tests that I know now that a lot of the teachers are also teaching in hybrid, right? When a virtual student needs something unlocked, it's very difficult to line up that schedule. So I saw the question asked, and I don't know the answer, whether that's something that virtual success coaches could help with, unlocking tests and quizzes. Do they not have access to Apex that way? Just a thought to try to loosen up that schedule a little bit because it's really tight with teachers being in the classroom.
We could take that idea back for consideration. There may be some off the top of my head, concern from teachers about
Yeah.
virtual success coaches
Yeah.
doing that versus them.
I get it. Yep.
And I know there's that timing lag. So I finished the unit Monday. I didn't get a 70. I want to go back and do it right away. I emailed the teacher, and the teacher doesn't get back to me for 24 hours. Yeah.
Thanks.
The only other follow-up, it was reminded me from the health class question. And so, middle school health. And so that's kind of put on a pause. I had one parent say to me that they found out it was on a pause on an X date, but the communication didn't go out until Y date.
Right.
And, there's so many plates spinning and so many balls up in the air that I know we're going to periodically drop a plate or a ball or two. If there is anything that can be done to streamline and expedite the communication process, I like your phrase of some structure and connectedness are what's needed. I would just say on the parent side that I've talked to, I think those are big things and big issues. And if we can somehow streamline, expedite that process, that was just one example of something that I get that. But I think that if the whole unlocking process, because I hear about that a lot too, and I think you might be right. A teacher might say, oh, I don't know how many people I want to have access to unlock. But on the other hand, and I know you're going to take it back, so take it back, try to figure that out. That teacher, Jen, may say, sure, you're the virtual success coach. I trust that you're not going to unlock it unless it needs to be unlocked. That would take some pressure off of me because I'm teaching this class. Or it would take the pressure off Jen because she's teaching the class, and she says, I'm just using that as another example of the whole virtual academy, I guess. I mean, we know the teachers that are teaching it, the students that are doing it, the parents, we know they want like a good education. They chose it maybe for a reason that they had to, the health thing. So anyway, I'm just blathering here. Any way we can expedite and streamline that process of communication from your end out, I just think that would be a really big win.
One of the on that structure and connectedness that I challenged the academic affairs team with on the call I was with them on today. They're both elementary and secondary are looking at developing a regularly scheduled newsletter for our WVA parents as a means of pushing out communication. I think one of the other problems is I never know where the email's coming from at home, right? And our team, I think the health one is a great example where the team was shotgunning answers to people instead of just putting out the answer to all the impacted people, right? So we were, as someone came, we were making so cleaning that up, tightening up the communication system so that there's a regularly scheduled thing that you look forward to that has the information. Timing any changes we're making sure that it can align to that communication chain. So we're not every day 3 different emails from 4 different people about something we're doing. Tighten that down, so that's what we're looking at 4 weeks in the virtual academy as kind of a two-way, beginning a communication piece, and then looking at continuing talking with our teachers and getting a better handle on it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm hearing, I don't know, I'm hearing community parents probably more likely. It's too hard. I don't know if it's age appropriate. I loved it. It's challenging my kid, doing great. So I mean, I'm getting, at least I'm hearing that. So I guess I'd say, let's try to shore up where we can shore up. And I don't need to keep talking. You tell me what we have in place right now, survey-wise, question-wise, etc. You said it already. Just remind me.
Sure. So the elementary team met with a large group of parents. I think Ms. Altman was on the call and Dr. Nestor Baker on the call. Large number of elementary parents providing feedback to the academic affairs team. From that, the academic affairs team has responded with some changes in the way they want to operate, including the video for math, looking further down the line, more structure. Secondary is beginning that process. They're working with our former PTA Council President, Liz Washburn, as a help to facilitate. She has children in the system too. So they're putting out a survey to parents, just kind of a blanket. Hey, tell me, what you're experiencing, so we can collect that and begin to work on that. And starting to organize grade level and content area meetings with WVA teachers to get feedback from them as well. So those are the pieces in place that we'll be looking at here in the short term.
Okay. Did you two feel like that was a good, I'm talking to Dr. Nestor Baker and Ms. Altman for you in television land. Did you feel like that was a good meeting? You feel like people heard and community felt like they shared, and was that a good thing?
I did think it was a very good meeting, and there were, I think, 37 parents or something like that on the meeting. For some, it was an opportunity to hear things from Barbara Wallace and Cheryl Relford that either they hadn't heard before or had gotten lost in the masses of emails that, as regards what kind of things are happening. I think that in and of itself is hugely important to hear from them. Here's what we're doing. Here's how we're trying to make this right for you. Here's the way we're trying to address the concerns. I think that is one of the most important things that we can do. We know how hard the people are working in this building to try and make things better, but if you're out there somewhere, you may not realize all that's going on. And to hear from Cheryl and Barbara about the videos that they've wanted to do and are now moving ahead and doing the idea about the 2-month plan so that people have that structure that they are craving, I think it was also very helpful. And just the opportunity for people to say, this is what I feel, was also extremely important.
Mm-hmm. Good. About the same?
Yeah, and I really appreciate that the parents and Barbara and Cheryl were willing to have an honest conversation, just to be there, and share. Sometimes that can be uncomfortable, but I felt like it was really productive. And I also really appreciated that a lot of the families had really thought through what would help them, what changes they were really looking for. And they were just really thoughtful with their feedback, both, all the way back to sort of what had gone on with Calvert to where we are now, and then making suggestions. And Barbara and Cheryl, were receptive to that, and I think we see some of that moving forward. So I think my sense of it, and I don't have a child in the elementary VA, so I can't represent as a parent, but my sense of it is there's sort of a lot of, I guess I'll call it, there's like a pregnant pause right now, like waiting to see whether this two-way dialogue actually will lead to changes that benefit kids. So I think that's where we are right now.
That's excellent. Thank you both. I didn't tell you I was going to ask ahead of time, but I just really appreciate them being on that call and saying yes, that was really helpful. And Jen, one of your phrases just was, and the parents were very specific about, but this would be helpful, and boy, this would be helpful. And I hope out there for any secondary families that are going to take the current survey that's going out there, and we'll follow that up with some meeting as well in some format, trying to figure that out too. But we can't fix what we don't have some concrete ideas about, and so we can share. We can do this. We can do this. Well, we're not so sure we can do that. So anyway, I didn't mean to put you all on the spot, but that was very helpful. Thank you for representing the board there. Yeah. Yes, Trace.
So I want to piggyback off what you said as far as streamlining communication to our families, and say that additionally to the staff. And as we talk about unlocking the quizzes and tests, I am very, very, very concerned. This is going to hit the teachers in a way that's probably not productive for them. So if we could be mindful what we put on their plate or make their problem, I'm sure everyone would appreciate that. And I say that because of what you said, and we know our teachers are just stretched.
No, that's great. I said I was going to stop talking, and I will after this. That's great because, Nancy, you said we know how hard the people in this building are working. And I know all 5 of us, 7 of us really, would say, and we know the teachers are stretched on every end possible. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're doing WVA and the class, and this one kid wants it unlocked, and you can't quite get there yet. So, so that's a great reminder that, and the kids are working hard too. I mean, we want to say that, the kids are working hard too out there.
So Rick,
I'm sorry, I diverted us off into that, but I thought that was an important...
No, Rick, if I could just keep us talking.
Sure.
The one thing that I hear consistently from WVA, elementary, secondary, and this is such a testament to our teachers, is that everybody wants more of our teachers, right? More engagement with our wonderful educators, right? And so, there's just a lot being asked, and we're so grateful to them, and they're in high demand. That's what people are missing. So in any case, just wanted to add.
That's a great reminder, and I'm not going to follow that up with any other comments.
I am.
Okay.
Just a brief one, and this is something that Greg Vibrandt, since he's controlling my device here, is probably going to shut me off once I say it. As I read the comments on social media, the questions that arise, the comments about, well, that was in an email dated such and such, or I saw this in something from the district dated such and such, or you need to go back and look for such and such communication. All of those communications, I've actually had some moms tell me, I've had too much communication. But all of the communication that we've sent out and all those explanations, I'm wondering if there's a way, this is where Greg's going to get mad, if there is a way to compile it so that I could go to the website and click on, here's a list of communications. Here are the emails that went out, so that I can then, open that up and remind myself of what was there or what I scrolled past in my inbox and didn't open. There's a lot of the questions that I'm seeing are pieces that I know have been addressed somewhere, but, we don't have them all at our fingertips, and, sometimes people miss them in the stress of life. So I'm just wondering if there's a way that we can digest them, list them in some way, put them all in one spot, so that, I'm not talking about the individual emails, I'm talking about all of those components of emails and the newsletters that are coming, and the pieces of information that we sent out about what a virtual online experience actually is and is not, all of those pieces, so that people can go to that page instead of saying, do you remember that one that came out on the 25th of August, that kind of thing. I think it would relieve some angst that people feel when they think either something hasn't been said, or they can't remember where they read it, or they don't know, what the intricacies of it were. So I don't know. It's just something I think to think about as we think about all the communicating that we've done, how we keep that in a way that people can refer to it in a way that makes sense for their lives.
I will sit down with Greg and talk about that one from a distance.
Yes. Sorry,
because
Greg.
of social distancing. Give you an example of everything everybody said is true, and then let's keep an eye on everything. So here's an example of the everything. Out of the elementary meeting, one of the key components was the need for writing. And so we went and looked at vendors we use for some digital writing tools. And the response time is not what we're used to, because this is everywhere. So these digital products that we rely on, either we already have relationships with these organizations or our new products we want to vet, the response time and ability to deliver that way has been impacted because this is a worldwide thing. So we're experiencing that as well as we move along. And so, yes, I think some communication pieces continue to bring those things forward, and bring those questions forward, and continue pushing us to find ways to get better. We're always going to operate from a sense of, in the long range, of not harming kids. The other thing that we have to keep an eye on is where are we 18 months from now? And so, those are on our minds about all of this disruption that's been going on since March. And what does it mean further on down the line? That's what I think is most prominent in people's minds, and I get that. This is new.
I'm really glad that you pointed that out. Sometimes, there's a sense and a desire to fix something right this minute, but the fix might actually be very harmful to kids when we're all back together again. So, the idea, as we look at the grading policies and as we look at how courses translate into courses that we currently offer in our face-to-face instruction, we have to be looking not just at now, as important as that is, but we have to be looking at when we're coming back together, because we are going to be coming back together. And if we come back together with a bifurcated or hodgepodge system that we plugged in here and there to fix what felt like a major problem, we've actually led ourselves to a greater problem down the road for families, for teachers, for administrators, for everyone. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. It is hard to keep it in mind sometimes under the pressure of fix this now.
Well, the last comment on this, and I'll move on, and it dovetails on what Ms. Altman said, is about what our families really want is access to our teachers. And that's the limited resource we have right now, is that we have this model that even if you're not in the WVA and you're remote, you're still 50% of the time. And even that feels different, right? Mrs. Davidson's talked about that school experience. It's not the same in-school experience with the social distancing and the mask. It doesn't have those same elements of lunchtime and recess, right? So none of it is what we want it to be. None of it is where we want to be. So we just got to keep working hard at it, grinding at it, and then make it as good as we can and figure out what we're going to do when we get that opportunity to regroup and do what we do best and capitalize on that. So I'm going to jump over to a different topic, which is discussions about equity and equity work. I know that's been a big part of our conversation as we talk about social justice in our community, in our school district. We had a presentation a few weeks ago to the board about 10 key targets around this that are going to drive our work. I've mentioned getting into the work in these equity teams. I want to bring the board up to speed on where we are and what we want to do next. First, I want to start with saying that we are already into our professional development component of this. We have developed 5 modules on implicit and institutional bias. They are by title: how racism and bias are impacting students' school experience. Number 2, understanding implicit bias. Number 3, how implicit bias is manifested in schools. Number 4, understanding your own bias. And number 5, mitigating unwanted biases, reflection, and action planning. So that's a professional development series we're already into. The secondary folks are doing this. We were doing a train-the-trainer model. So through our team here, we've trained key staff to be able to deliver these modules. They will start doing that with principals and their equity teams at the district level to get them comfortable with these modules so that they can then turn around and provide training with those same modules to their staff in their buildings, so that we're all learning together and teaching together, which is one of the ways we learn on these ideas. Elementary is a little bit behind that. Keep in mind, our secondary equity teams are a little bit further ahead than our elementary because of our work with equal opportunity schools. So that had driven us there. They're a little bit ahead on some of this. Elementary, they're a fast crew. They'll catch up, but they just did some principal training on cultural competency last week. And then they'll follow the same PD. We're also working with Ohio State Kerwin Institute on a kind of a pre and post survey on some of these measures of people's perceptions of their own bias and the bias they see in their school. So the PD part is up and running. Get our large scale, large organization mindset in the right place to start working on this work on having the difficult conversations and challenge ourselves to be better. Aside from that, we've been working on some components of our equity teams. We want to provide some structure to the district equity team. So we're working on purpose of the equity team, membership on the equity team, role of the equity team, building equity teams, again, membership, purpose, what's the relationship, organizational relationship between those two. People have used the word accountability, and that one worries me a little bit. It's more about two-way communication. How do we align ourselves? How do we align our resources? How do we align the work? How do we hold each other together around doing this work? We also, so looking at just at the teams, but then the organizational structure. What's the relationship with the district equity team, the building equity teams, and departments in our organization? Human resources, transportation, food service. So putting that map together to share with the board so we can coordinate our efforts collectively. And then using goal setting, action plans and strategies as a means of providing two-way communication to the system and engaging more community members. Those building equity teams, district equity teams, bringing in student voice, staff voice, parent voice, community voice into the system collectively across all 24 buildings. So those are the areas we're looking at. We're also looking at potential investment needs moving along. Investment in professional development, investment in additional support, human resource support for the work. So we're packaging that so that the board can see that. I'm also looking at some of our policies and administrative guidelines that we already have in place to see where we can create alignment between what we're doing. For example, in curriculum and materials adoption would be one. Where can we align those to some of the work we want to do? So to be honest, the building equity teams are already kind of off and running. My goal would be at the next board meeting, which I think is the 12th, share more concisely with the board and the community those components I just described so that we can get those in place. On the 14th of that week, that Wednesday, we have an all administrator meeting, and in that place, what I'd like to do is then present that as part of a district goal for this year for our administrators. So that's where we're getting to in terms of our equity team, so we can start looking at some of these key areas done on those key targets we talked about. So I wanted to just update you where we are on that and let you know that the game plan is to bring you something on a more strategic plan in our next meeting in 2 weeks. But happy to answer any questions on that one as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Any questions, comments on this last piece of the superintendent's update?
I just have a real quick one. You mentioned the 5 modules have been developed. So who's developing those? Are we developing those in-house? How is that?
Cynthia DeVries has worked in conjunction with Kerwin and other places. These are modules that we've used before and are building out. So we have a great partnership with Kerwin. They've been a great partner with us in providing us a lot of resources.
Okay, thanks.
At some point in time, I'd like to see those modules, if I could.
Yes. I just got hold of the first draft of the survey. I'm going to look at that. We'll share that with board before we roll that out. So these components will be in there for you all to see.
Excellent. Any other questions, comments?
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you thank Cynthia and the rest of the team for all the hard work. I know a lot of work has gone into this and have seen the drafts that you've shared with us. So thank you for putting that together for us and moving this work forward.
Appreciate that. So that's my update where we are 5 weeks into the school year. I think we are now.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
No other comments or questions for Dr. Kellogg at this time, right? Okay. All right. Thank you, Dr. Kellogg. Moving on to agenda item 7, public comments, 7.01, public comments pertaining to action items. You have on your screen, on the document there, a place for you to submit those comments. Comments that have been submitted already, we are going to read those in the public comment section that comes closer to the end of the board meeting. Agenda item 8.01, approve the financial report and investments for August 2020. May I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much. Ms. Marshall, will you share with us?
Yes, thank you, President Falardo, members of the board. So we are going over the August 31st month-end financial statements. For the general fund, we had year-to-date receipts of $50.9 million and year-to-date expenditures of $32.9 million. And we ended with the general fund unencumbered balance of $134.4 million. For all funds, we had year-to-date receipts of $63.5 million, year-to-date expenditures of $44.3 million, and we ended with an unencumbered fund balance of $295 million. And not a lot of change in the investments from last month. Are there any questions?
When do we, the question I'd like to ask is compare where we are now with a year or so ago. But what I think I'm going to ask is, because I think that's an important question, but given everything, all right, that's going on, when do you do your next 5-year forecast?
So the 5-year forecast is due to ODE by the end of November. So we'll present that at the November board meeting.
Okay, so we're gonna get that kind of information in about a month.
Yeah. So a couple things regarding timing with the forecast. We're still waiting on ODE to update payment reports. Our state foundation is still based on previous year's numbers, all of our deductions going out and things like that. So that all happens, the second payment in October. And so that's a significant piece for us that we're still evaluating. And, with all the changes we keep getting with the different various funding mechanisms that they have with the CARES Act funding and everything else. So, yeah, I do think November will be the soonest we'll have that.
I think people sometimes in their own financial world will say, how am I doing now as opposed to a year ago, a couple years ago, and if they're closer to retirement, how am I doing? So, I mean, I get that line of thinking. I think that's entirely appropriate. But having gone through now pandemic and extra expenditures and state reduction and millions of dollars lost and then vouchers on top of that, I'm not sure, given this year in which the orchard's a mess.
Yes, so this year is quite the anomaly. So we will do the best we can with the information that we have right now. So just with state funding, I've presented to the board the effects of state funding to date. We're still about $5.6 million less than where we thought we would be with state revenues. With the regular state foundation funding. So as part of my 5-year forecast presentation, we will have a comparison to last year. That's typically what I do. Right. But it is difficult to try to use last year as a base year to project going forward because, everything kind of shut down in March and with everything going on. So yeah, it's
a apple to a rock
Right.
comparison, or something like
and
that.
then this
right?
year in virtual, then we're in blended,
Right.
and what's the rest of the year going to look like?
Right.
That's anybody's guess at this point. So it's like,
So I think I would say to the community, see if you would concur, if kind of the financial snapshot of where we are, where we've been, where we're headed, really tune in to that November meeting in which you're going to do the five-year forecast, which in and of itself is a difficult thing to do, but that's a really helpful tool for the community to try and grasp. And I just say try and grasp, not
Yeah.
they grasp it, I'm sure, as well as I do. But I think that
yeah.
November
So
meeting is
I
important.
will do my best to update projections as accurately as I can, based on the information that we'll have available to us, and to try to explain it in a way that people will understand. It's just a very uncertain time. I mean, we still don't know if the state will make additional cuts to what they've already made to our state funding. There's just a lot of uncertainties at this point.
Yep. For us, and we acknowledge for Joe and Jane taxpayer.
Right.
We recognize that's really hard.
Yeah.
There are still people not getting their unemployment. Not so. I just wanted to say we know this is
Absolutely.
important, and so that November meeting is an important forum for you to try and grasp what that's all about. And you'll do a great job. You always do explaining it. If I can understand it when you explain it, sister, you're doing a good job
Thank
of
you, Mr.
explaining it.
Velardo.
So any other comments from the board? Hearing none, please
Dr.
call the
Nesbaker?
roll.
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Ottman?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes, agenda item 8.02 to amend the fiscal year 2021 annual appropriations. May I have a motion
So
and a
moved.
second to do that, please?
Second?
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments for Ms. Marshall? If not,
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
please call the roll.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Ottman?
Yes.
Dr. Nesbaker?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes, thank you very much. Agenda item 9, personnel consent agenda, which is 9.01 through 9.10. May I have a
So
motion
moved.
and a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Dr. Hopkins is on the line. Will you share with us, please?
Yes, good evening, President Velardo, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg. I'd like to present some highlights from tonight's personnel consent agenda. We have 3 retirements on tonight's agenda. Brenda McDonald is retiring from her study hall monitor position at Genoa effective November. She has provided Westerville with over 20 years of service. We also have David Boroff. He's retiring from his Spanish teaching position over at South effective February 2021. He has provided Westerville with 21 years of service. And finally, Miss Marianne Hines is retiring from her English teaching position at North High School effective October 2020. And she has provided Westerville with 35 years of incredible service. We thank all 3 of these professionals for their great contributions to the Westerville community. We also have 11 classified resignations. However, I'd like to note that 5 of these 11 resignations are actually resigning to move to another position within the district. We're excited about that. And with respect to employment, we have 17 individuals being recommended for employment in a variety of classified positions and a number of individuals being recommended for various supplemental positions across the district. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Hopkins. Do we have a bucket load of bus drivers in there, sir? We could use some more bus drivers, sir.
We do have a few, but we certainly could use more. Yes, sir.
All right. So we have a few. We don't quite have a bucket load. That's what you're telling me.
That's correct.
Thank you. Sorry. So Ms. Hines has been at North for how long?
35.
I'm going to ask Ms. Miss Altman, did you have Miss
No,
Honey?
no, but many of my friends did, and we actually live near each other, so I see her quite a bit, and this is huge. There are people I know who are still impacted by her and still talk about her classes being the greatest classes that made such an impression when she taught journalism, and so we just owe a lot to Mary Ann Hines, and I just want to thank her for that. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. I wondered when they were north at that time. Listen, I listed others who have been with us for a while as well. We are not looking for anybody. Thank you so much for your service and blessings on your retirement to all of you. Any questions, comments? Hearing none. Ms. Marshall, please call the roll.
Baker,
Yes.
Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo.
Yes, thank you very much. Moving on, old business, agenda item 10.01, final reading. Policy 1662, anti-harassment policy, recommended that this be approved. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much. And this is old business, so we've all had a chance to review and take a look. Any questions? Any final? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo.
Yes, thank you very much. 10.02, final reading, policy 2260, non-discrimination, equal access to educational opportunity. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Hearing any questions, comments? None.
Ms.
Please
Lawton?
call the roll.
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo.
Yes, thank you very much. Agenda item 10.03, policy 3362, anti-harassment, recommended action.
So moved.
May I have a motion and a second? Questions or comments?
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Mr.
Please
Bell,
call the roll.
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo.
Yes, thank you very much. Agenda item 10.04, policy 4362, anti-harassment. May I have a motion and a second? Any questions or comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo.
Yes, thank you very much. Agenda item 10.05, final reading policy 5517,
So
anti-harassment.
moved.
May I have a motion and a second? Thank you very much. Now, any questions or comments? The board will harass me because I took all of those separately, and you may have noted that they were all anti-harassment. But if you have been with us in previous meetings, you'll know that that represents different subgroups. So there are different policies addressing different groups along the anti-harassment. So I took that away from the board to hassle me about
Yes.
Mr. Bell,
questions or comments.
Yes.
Hearing
Mrs.
none,
Yes.
please call the
Dr.
roll.
Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo.
Yes, thank you very much. Those are all very important policies, and we go through them. And I want to thank Dr. Nancy Nestor Baker, who is our policy policy support, and for those of us, those behind the scenes who have done a lot of work on that as well. Mr. Hershiser, I know, has his hand in that, and that's a lot of work, but it's very important work. Moving on, agenda item 11.01, These are first readings, policy 1530, and I think Dr. Hopkins is going to come back on because some of these are similar and we're going to group them together. Am I remembering that correctly, Dr. Hopkins? Am I getting that backwards?
You are correct, sir.
I'm sure Dr. Hopkins will join us in just a moment, but I'll continue on. Oh, sorry, he's talking.
Okay, it might be a little bit delayed. President Velardo, members.
You were...
Dr. Kellogg, can you hear me okay? I'd like to go ahead and present for your consideration the revisions to policy 1530 and policies 3124. Policy 1530 is the evaluation of principals and other administrators, which provides updates around who is impacted by this policy, removes references to OTES, and more clearly states what is necessary in the final evaluation report for an administrator in his or her last year of his or her contract. Policy 3124, employment contract, seeks to remove language about the contract sequence cycle for administrators, since this language is already covered in policy 1520, the employment of administrators. These revisions are recommended for approval to ensure accurate policies are in place.
Thank you, Dr. Hopkins. I'm sorry I had muted the background. That's why I didn't hear you, and the rest of my board was looking at me cross-eyed. Any questions on these two particular policies at this point? All right. Dr. Hopkins, 11.03, first reading policy 6144.
That's actually me, Mr. Velardo.
Clearly, I'm out of my sequence here. Ms. Marshall, would you please?
Thank you, President Velardo, members of the board. So this is, which one are we on? 6144 investments. So this policy is being revised to include the provisions of House Bill 251. Actually went into effect in 2018. So we're a little late updating, but it increases from 5 to 10 years the maturity period for other political subdivisions, bonds and other obligations eligible for investment of the district's interim funds. And that's the only change to that policy.
Great. Thank you very much. Any questions at this point? Hearing none. 11.04, first reading policy 6152, student fees, fines, and charges being revised. Ms. Marshall.
Thank you, President Velardo, members of the board. This policy is being revised to include language clarifying circumstances where fees may and may not be charged. And it also adds language for the online payment of fees. The district currently works with EasyPay to provide that opportunity to our families. We just didn't have it in the policy previously.
Great. Thank you very much. Moving on, policy 11.05, first reading, policy 6152.01, waiver of school fees for instructional materials being revised. Ms. Marshall.
Thank you. So this revision is to allow for fee waivers for circumstances where the school meal program may not apply, and to clarify that students who qualify for free or reduced lunch and breakfast receive a 50% discount and a 50% waiver on their fees.
Great. Thank you very much. Agenda item 11.06, first reading policy 6233, amenities for participants at meetings and or other occasions being revised. Ms. Marshall.
Thank you. So this policy is being revised to include examples of what amenities can be provided as a proper public purpose to promote education, enhance morale and rapport, and encourage the participation in such activities. And it's recommended for the board's approval.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Marshall. Any questions about any of those first reading policies, clarifications? Great. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Agenda item 12.01, donations to our school district from many different resources and people. May I have a motion and a second to receive these donations, please?
Second.
Thank you very much. Unbelievable how we are supported throughout this community and from people in the schools, from supporter groups. We are blown away by this, and it is a tremendous blessing. So we are very grateful for this. Thank you to all above and beyond. May I please call the roll?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, people. Agenda item 12.02, summer graduate. May I have a motion and a second to approve Talia Evans Kayija from North High School, Westerville North High School, who completed all local and state requirements. May I have a motion and a second? Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Kellogg, you want to chime in and just give a shout out to this?
It doesn't matter if it's 1 or if it's 100. It's great to see graduates. This is what we work for. So congratulations to her and her family, to everybody who supported her.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I hope you are watching. I hope you hear the congratulations from us, but certainly no, job well done. Thank you. Yes, please
Mr.
call
Bell?
the roll, Ms. Marshall.
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes, thank you very much. Agenda item 12.03. New middle school program of requirements. May I have a motion and a second? Thank you very much. Mr. LaRose, would you come in and tell us about this resolution?
Oh, thank you so much. Members of the board recently completed the OFCC's 4-phase design submission process for the renovation and expansion of Amherst and the new elementary school in Minerva Park. This resolution is for the approval of requirements phase for the new middle school. The schematic design, the design development, and construction documents phases will be presented at future board meetings, tentatively scheduled for October, January, and April. As we developed the POR, we met with curriculum and instruction, special ed, and career tech and college readiness, and the results were reviewed with senior leadership on September 4th. And based on their feedback, the current plan is to construct a 120,000 square foot middle school. The OFCC credits 113,000 for the design of an 800 student middle school. Thus, just under 7,000 square foot would be considered a locally funded initiative. The LFI is in part a result of the district's request to have larger spaces for the cafeteria, media center, and gymnasium as compared to the OFCC's school design manual. The district considered the size of these spaces in our existing middle schools when making this decision. We are currently on schedule to award a construction contract in July of next year, with the school being operational for the 23-24 school year as presented in the bond levy literature, and opening just 1 year after the opening of the new elementary school. On Friday, the OFCC approved our POR submission, and this evening, we are requesting the board's approval of the POR. Also, approval authorizing the superintendent and treasurer to sign the LFI Memorandum of Understanding, and authorizing the design team to continue with the preparation of the schematic design as written in this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Could you say one more time, you just said it, just want to capture it,
Sure.
the square feet and what part of that would be considered the locally funded initiative as opposed to OFCC, and just describe, just thumbnail, what that means. Tell our community what that means.
So the OFCC design manual for 800 student middle school, they have in the design manual 113,000 square feet carved out for 800 students. So that would be the creditable amount that would be eligible for the state reimbursement. Anything above that would be considered a locally funded initiative, which the district would be responsible for 100% of that. So we currently are around 120,000 square feet. That's similar to the size of Heritage. And so that difference of 7,000, just under 7,000 square feet. So when we reviewed that with curriculum and instruction, we looked at the media centers and the other 4 middle schools, as well as the cafes, the gymnasiums. And there was a selection based on, for example, they felt that Heritage had a good sized media center. It's about 4,000 square feet. So the OFCC allows 2,800 for a media center. And we currently have 4,000 programmed into the POR. So again, the difference being 7,000 would be the locally funded initiative. And that will probably change as we get further into the design and start honing in on the actual schematic design, excuse me, and design development. But as it stands right now, that's where we're at.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments for, yes?
I just wanted to add something. So these amounts for the LFI and the state shared amounts, that's what we planned for with the bond issue. So that's within the amounts that we had in the bonds.
Yep. Great. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none. Thank you, Mr. LaRose. Please call the roll, Ms. Marshall.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Dr. Nestabaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes, thank you very much. Moving on, agenda item 12.04, Treasurer's Contract. Treasurer's Contract. May I have a motion and a second to approve the contract Board of Education for Nicole Marshall, period August 1, 2021 through July 31, 2026. A motion and a second, please.
Second.
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments? Hearing none. Ms. Marshall, please call the roll.
Yes.
Dr. Nestabaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Marshall, and congratulations, Ms. Marshall. Moving on, agenda item 13.01, public comments. These are comments for the general nature, the public comment toward the end of a traditional school board meeting. We've had some submitted online ahead of time, and I've asked Dr. Kellogg if he would read.
Thank you, President Velardo. I have 7 here that I'll read through. I'll provide the name of the person who submitted. These are ones that came in to me by mid-afternoon today, so if something came afterwards, I apologize. Again, I'll read the comments and provide response to these folks via email as we get back. The first one is from Kim Snyder. It reads, "We need to have our children learning in the classrooms. Even those who have tested positive, ages K to 12, have not had serious medical issues. Nursing homes are where the greatest issues have happened, and even they are opening back up in person. Let's do the same for our low-risk kids. Yes, keep the option of virtual for those who want it, but if the nursing homes can do it, then so can the schools." The next one is from Lisa Cohen. It says, "I appreciate and understand the change in cohort schedule to ensure both cohorts receive equal days of in-person learning. And looking at the new schedule, I'm extremely concerned and disappointed that cohort A will be in person from December 11th to January 11th. That is 4 weeks of no interaction, parentheses. Yes, I know there is a winter break, parentheses. But cohort B will only go 2 weeks without in-person instruction. Why is cohort A not starting as the first week in person after winter break? Why is cohort B starting the week after winter break when they're in person the week prior to winter break? To have the week before and after winter break as a remote with no teacher interaction for the kids in cohort A is frankly unacceptable, assuming we are still in a blended format. Perhaps this is less worrisome for middle school, high schoolers, but for the younger children, parentheses, I have a first and fourth grader, and parentheses, this will be devastating to the progress they're making, not to mention burdensome for families with working parents outside childcare, without outside childcare. I strongly urge the board to relook at the schedule and find a fair and proper balance for the time surrounding winter break so it is fair for all children regardless of cohort. The next one, the third one, is from Leslie Perini. Our children are back in the classrooms! Exclamation point. While it is every other week, I know this is making a difference. I've seen it in the faces of the cohort A children, and I've heard the relief in their voices. The teachers have stated how much it has meant to meet and engage with their students. This is the step we need to begin the journey forward and a step to living with COVID, not despite it. I would like to know, should our hybrid model be successful, what plans are being made to return the children full-time? The 6-foot social distance standards are a barrier to Compass's action. How are other schools managing this? Surrounding districts with each milestone keep stepping up to the next stage. What is our next stage? Please share with us the strategy. Hope without a strategy is just a wish. Number 4 comes from Todd Lotz. This is a longer one. Comment: We all know communication, integrity, honesty is critical and important today. Yet, unfortunately, our leadership has shown they have not grasped the concept of it as of yet. Even after waiting over 6 weeks to finally receive an offer for a phone call from our superintendent on a variety of issues constantly addressed, namely lack of transparent communication and lack of integrity, honesty to the system versus own children/grandchildren, there have been instances where that still is not being made. Example number 1 is right after an overdue talk from our superintendent and no admittance of wrong on their part when their ethics, integrity, morality was questioned, apparent communication issues regarding a lack of bus route planning was featured the same evening on a local TV newscast, negatively impacting at least one family. How is that effective and transparent communication over the last 2 to 3 months, if not longer? Example number 2 was the email sent out inconsistent inequality of in-person learning days between Pod A and Pod B. The public saw the issue and reported it to the board prior to the last board meeting. Was there any communication at the last board meeting regarding this? Not a word. What happened next? An email did go out, but was there any mention about the public notifying leadership about it? Not a word, but instead there was these words, quote, following additional review of the effects of these decisions, we have determined that there is a need to create a better balance of the number of in-person instructional days for the cohort. Without this adjustment, over the course of the school year, students in cohort A would receive 8 more days of in-person instruction than students in cohort B. By making this adjustment, the schedules balance and both groups of students receive 75 days of in-person instruction. Unquote. What additional review was needed since the public was apparently better at pointing that out than our own leadership? But to show their gratitude, respect, and appreciation to those they serve, what does our leadership do? Say not a word. What does that show historically? That leadership prefers not to show they're human, admit their wrongness, and instead make excuse after excuse instead of being human. We're all human and make mistakes, but covering that up, allowing one's ego and refusal to show humility based on video proof, admitting mistakes means nothing if not backing it up with change. While I personally had to wait 6 weeks not only to receive an offer of a phone call that should have been addressed initially, there was more agreement that failures were made in regards to my daughter's issues, parentheses, which, by the way, our superintendent has not done one thing to own up to and actually follow up on to date, even after a follow-up email 3 days later, parentheses. Yet a refusal to admit their own untruths and inconsistencies that are backed by video evidence and even attempt to turn the blame over to parent and citizen is sad to present. If our entire leadership wants to portray themselves by the way they have in the last 2+ months at least, if not longer, I ask, parentheses, advised by our superintendent to please challenge him and the board on parentheses, that treat our constituents the same way you raise and treat your own family, your own children and grandchildren. If you have failed, it is okay to show you're human and show true authenticity and admit it and explain why. Do not say, as I've heard from a pastor in the past, mistakes have been made with no explanation as to what those mistakes were. While tough decisions continue to be made and equality is not provided to all situations, as has been confirmed to me at least, if not others, being transparent, parentheses, which does not mean speaking for the entire board and sunshine laws, parentheses, means, as Webster's dictionary defines the word, quote, free from pretense or deceit, easily detected or seen through, readily understood, characterized by visibility or accessibility of information, especially concerning business practices, unquote. Remember, an attitude of gratitude goes further than an attitude of arrogance. Remember, if you want grace, it is tougher to receive grace if there are different standards set. If you're wrong, it's okay to be humble and admit it. See examples of July switch, knowing it would not hold up between remote and hybrid learning model and known evidence prior to the decisions made, saying you follow up communication yet only under certain conditions, passing off student issues caused by leadership failures to certain departments instead of being proactive and doing the right thing if the needs of our students are indeed front and center, parentheses, especially failures, parentheses. All we ask is not only our parents who preach consistency to our kids in all circumstances be shown that by our leadership as well, since that is what they state they share with their families. You as leaders are the examples of how to lead, how you respond, and especially how you deal with failures in your leadership when it comes to the well-being, emotional, mental health, especially with our higher risk children already suffering with the current situation will determine the legacy you leave for all your children, grandchildren, and the overall health of our school system. Remember, it's better to do the job right, do the right thing, even if it's not the most popular or socially viewed thing to do, than follow the flock just because it's what the world says. Remember, your constituents are watching and taking note of how you improve your communication issues and transparency in all steps of the process being discussed and made will either regain trust or further erode trust in the leadership we have currently. Thank you. Next one's a bit shorter, from Kristen Thompson. I would like to know what the requirements are for kids to go back 100% school days for those that have not chosen WVA. Also, many students have chosen how many students have chosen the WVA per middle school building? Excuse me for a second. Number 6 comes from Sonia Reed. It's a long one. Hello, I continue to be concerned about the quality of education being provided to my child who is in the WVA. 1, an app-based education is not adequate. Over the summer, my child had wanted to continue using Lexia and Dreambox, but our kindergarten teacher cautioned us that it would become difficult and frustrating without accompanying instruction, and yet here we are continuing with those same programs without instruction. My child is currently spending 3 to 4 hours staring at a screen. This is not education. Movement should be incorporated into effective education. Feedback and correction is needed in an effective education. Discussion and critical thinking should occur in effective education. Songs, art, creative thinking, hands-on activities, emotional investment are crucial in learning and recall. I'm not an educator, so I'm sure there are other critical components we're missing. Instead of meeting those critical needs, the administration keeps piling on more and more apps. Apps are not the answer. Number 2, the videos my daughter is watching for Hegarty and foundations are not great. Often the speaker moves too fast and references materials we do not have, magnetic letters, yellow book, etc. Number 3, related arts have been disappointing. We've completed 4 weeks of class and our related arts instruction has consisted entirely of a list of suggestions for physical activity and a single drawing. However, in 4 weeks, that was the first time my daughter had been instructed to color. What other first grade classroom would not incorporate crayons until week 3, and then just one time? None. My child had been thrilled to accept an invitation to the Hamby Arts Magnet program for her first grade year. When I told her last week we finally had an art assignment, she was so excited. Quote, "That's what my school is all about," unquote. And we watched the video addressing kindergartners, she's in first grade, and it referenced 2 elementary schools we never attended. She was very disappointed and felt overlooked, a feeling I've been familiar with as part of a parent of WVA since August. Number 4, over 2 weeks ago, I was assured by administration that our students would be provided with SEL instruction. Our students are currently experiencing the biggest ongoing mental health crisis of their lives. My child has yet to have this addressed in any way by the school. I was told the counselors would be providing pre-recorded PATHS lesson to the students. Yet we're going in our 5th week of class with no sign of this whatsoever. None of the apps will help her deal with the very real and current issues of anxiety, and certainly this would not be added on later, but addressed as a priority it is. Number 5, I would like to see a mapping of Ohio's standards for education to our current instruction and curriculum. There's a lot I don't think can be covered by apps, and I would like to see the plan for how the gaps will be addressed. Please include standards for 1st grade for fine arts, visual arts, fine arts dance, fine arts drama, fine arts music, fine arts media arts, financial literacy, health education, physical education, technology, and social emotional. Number 6, please explain to me the role of our teacher currently. She's made herself available to us when we need assistance, and she's doing her best to make things easier and provide optional assignments. However, it seems that she's been removed from the decision-making process about what my child should be learning and how. I would like to understand why. She's also not providing any feedback or instruction. Blended students get success coaches on top of their teachers. Does my child not deserve someone, quote, monitoring engagement during online learning and supporting the delivery of educational intervention? Number 7, in an email from Dr. Ebrick, emailed dated July 22nd, 2020, when our family was deciding whether or not to enroll or not, he told me that, quote, student academic plans will be mutually developed with the parent, teacher, and student, unquote. Neither myself nor my student nor our teacher has been part of developing the current academic plan. Many teachers and parents are feeling left out of the conversation and overlooked. The teacher should be driving this conversation, not the administration. I believe I read 25% of WCS students are enrolled in WVA. This is not an insignificant amount. That's 1 out of every 4 students. I would like the administration to treat WVA students with the care and concern as given the remote blended students. Remote students haven't sacrificed specials. Remote students haven't had their instruction provided primarily by apps. Remote students haven't sacrificed all teacher or classmate interaction. I don't understand why WVA students have to. Yes, it needs to be asynchronous and or optional to meet the needs of everyone, but that doesn't mean it can't or shouldn't exist at all. Number 8, I have a 1st grader, and I'm also very concerned about the lack of handwriting practice or instruction we've been given so far. At least in Calvert, she was being asked to write 4 or 5 sentences each day. Since the new app-based program has been introduced, in those 3+ weeks, she has practiced writing maybe 10 individual letters, as in T, N, etc., 5 times each. I know it's a hard place you're in, unprecedented and all that, but I must advocate for what is best for my child, and a primarily app-based education isn't it. I understand it as a starting point and as a supplement, but I expect much more as we move forward. Education is not filling of a bucket, but the lighting of a fire, quote William Butler Yeats. Then number 7, last one from Suzanne Shetler. I want to congratulate Dr. Tomlin and his staff for an excellent 1st week of in-person classes at Heritage Middle School. My grandson had an excellent 1st week as a 6th grader, and everyone did an awesome job to prepare students, parents, grandparents for the opening day. It's obvious how hard everyone worked and how much they care. My sincere thanks to all for making this transition so smooth. Those are the 7 public comments presented that I had. I'll see if anything came in before the meeting, and we'll address those.
Thank you, Dr. Kellogg. I thank each person for taking the time, expressing their concerns, their celebrations, at least in regard to the last one, those questions that are still out there. And we're grateful when people contact us, and as Dr. Kellogg said, we certainly will be attempting to follow up with each person, trying to provide the information that they are seeking. Moving on to agenda item 14.01, board comments. Any comments anyone has at this point? Hearing none, I am just going to say thank you for watching us. Thank you for all those behind the scenes. What do we have, about 20 people, 20, 25 people behind the scenes back in there? About 20 or so. So thank you. Many of them on staff have worked a long day and are hanging in there with us and doing their part. So thank you to the team, and thank you, Dr. Kellogg, for the superintendent's report. I know there's a lot to do in that, and we pledge to try and do what we can, and reaching out to those surveys and the community groups. And again, thank you to Jen and to Nancy for representing us in the first one of those for the secondary elementary, wasn't it? I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. I was 50% there, so it's elementary one. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 15, dates, times, locations. We will meet again virtually. Regular meeting, 6 p.m., Monday, October 12th, out of this location. Moving on, agenda item 16.01. I would like a motion and a second to go into executive session for the purpose of considering compensation and employment of a public employee. May I have a motion and a second? Thank you very much. Any discussion, comment? Hearing none. Mr. Marshall, please call the roll.
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes, thank you very much. We are moving into executive session, and from that, we will adjourn. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.